I can't marry someone who's already dead. He stinks, I can't even breathe. Look at the mighty king now. All that gold, and for what? Good riddance to false majesty.
All the maidens in the village rejected the sick prince. You won't believe what would happen next. Esteemed viewers, welcome to Luxurious True Life Stories. Please like and subscribe for more captivating luxury true stories. Let's get into the story. Onima Village was a powerful kingdom built on stone walls, golden towers, and ancient royal laws. The palace stood at the center of the land like a crown carved from marble, surrounded by gardens, fountains, and long white corridors that echoed with history. King Kelvin Benson ruled with discipline and calm authority. He was known as a fair king, firm in justice, gentle in mercy, and respected across neighboring kingdoms. His late wife, Queen Helena, had left behind a legacy of kindness and wisdom that still shaped palace traditions. The people trusted the Benson bloodline, believing it carried destiny itself. Prince Obinna Benson, the only son and heir, was raised in wealth, power, and expectation. From childhood, he was trained in leadership, diplomacy, combat, and royal etiquette. He learned multiple languages, studied history, loved architecture, and spent quiet evenings reading alone in the palace library. Despite the luxury around him, Obinna lived an emotionally isolated life. He was admired, desired, and praised, but rarely understood. Everywhere he went, people bowed to his title, not to his heart. He longed for sincerity, for a connection that wasn't built on gold, crowns, or power. The kingdom, however, cared less about his feelings and more about his duty. The council pressured King Kelvin daily about succession, marriage, and heirs. The people wanted a queen. The nobles wanted influence. The palace wanted stability. And Obinna felt trapped between love and responsibility. Though admired by many women, he feared being chosen for his throne instead of his soul. In the silent halls of the palace, a conflict was already forming, one that would soon change the fate of the kingdom, the throne, and the meaning of love in Onima forever. Prince Obinna's days were filled with duty, not freedom. From sunrise, his life followed strict royal schedules, meetings with nobles, military briefings, political councils, and ceremonial appearances. He rode horses at dawn, trained with royal guards by noon, and studied governance by evening. Every moment of his life was controlled, planned, and watched. The palace saw a perfect prince. But inside, Obinna felt like a prisoner of expectation. He found peace only in quiet places, the palace library, the royal stables, and the high balcony overlooking Onima Village. He loved drawing building designs, sketching cities, and imagining a world where he could live as a man, not just a prince. He dreamed of love that felt safe, simple, and real. Not love that came with contracts, alliances, or political advantage. But such love felt impossible in a palace where everyone wanted something from him. King Kelvin noticed his son's emotional distance. As a father, he worried. As a king, he felt pressure. The council constantly reminded him that Obinna needed a wife, a queen, and heirs. The kingdom's future depended on it. And so, quietly, without Obinna's consent, the palace began opening its gates to noble families, wealthy elites, and powerful women, each hoping to place their daughter beside the throne. What started as royal tradition slowly became a silent competition for power, influence, and the crown. The first was Susan, daughter of one of the richest families connected to the Royal Trade Council. She arrived at the palace draped in luxury, confidence shining in her posture. Susan believed wealth was power, and power was love. She had been raised to see marriage as a strategic move, and becoming queen felt like a natural next step. Behind her polished smile was pride and calculation. She spoke often of future reforms, royal expansion, and how perfectly she would fit beside the throne. The second was Rita, celebrated across Onima for her breathtaking beauty. Artists painted her portrait, poets wrote about her eyes, and crowds followed her presence. Rita believed beauty could soften any heart and open any door. She enjoyed admiration and attention, and the palace only magnified her desire to be seen. Though charming and graceful, she feared invisibility more than rejection. To her, becoming queen meant being admired forever. The third was Pamela, known for her intelligence and sharp reasoning. She was educated, articulate, and respected by scholars and diplomats alike. Pamela believed knowledge was the greatest power. She admired Obinna's intellect and thought they would rule as equals. Yet beneath her confidence lived ambition. She wanted the throne not just for status, but to prove her superiority in a world that often underestimated clever women. Each woman entered the palace believing she was the best choice. None noticed the prince's silence, his guarded heart, or his growing doubt. And as their rivalry intensified, the palace slowly became a battlefield of smiles, whispers, and hidden intentions, while Obinna watched, unsure which face hid truth, and which hid danger. The palace changed once Susan, Rita, and Pamela became frequent guests. Laughter echoed louder, footsteps hurried more often, and whispers followed every corner. Each woman played her role carefully. Susan impressed the council with promises of economic growth, donating lavish gifts and hosting elegant gatherings. Rita captured attention effortlessly, walking through the gardens as though the world itself existed to admire her. Pamela engaged the scholars and advisors, debating policy and royal law with sharp confidence. To the outside world, it looked like healthy courtship. Inside the palace, it was a silent war. Compliments were weapons. Smiles hid rivalry. Each woman tried to outshine the others, subtly belittling their strengths while magnifying her own. Servants carried rumors. Guards overheard insults disguised as jokes. And Prince Obinna felt more distant with every passing day. Instead of feeling desired, he felt studied, like a prize to be won. Obinna began avoiding public dinners and royal gatherings. He watched from balconies as the three women competed, none asking what he truly wanted. King Kelvin, though pleased by their interest, noticed his son's withdrawal. The more the palace pushed marriage, the more Obinna retreated inward. What was meant to secure the throne was slowly suffocating the prince, and planting the first seeds of a dangerous idea that would soon test everyone's intentions. Late one evening, Obinna stood alone in the palace courtyard, staring at the moon reflected in the fountain. The laughter from a distant banquet drifted through the air, yet none of it reached his heart. He questioned everything: love, loyalty, and whether anyone would stand by him if the crown was stripped away. The thought troubled him deeply. If sickness, weakness, or loss ever found him, would any of these women remain? His doubt grew heavier after overhearing a conversation between visiting nobles. They spoke openly about how powerful Susan's family would become if she became queen, how Rita's beauty would charm foreign alliances, and how Pamela's mind would strengthen governance. Not once did they speak of love. That night, Obinna realized he was being discussed like land or gold. Something to be claimed, not cherished. The fear of a false marriage consumed him. He wanted certainty, proof of genuine devotion beyond title and privilege. And so, in the silence of the courtyard, an idea formed. A dangerous one. A test that would strip away ambition and expose truth. But such a plan would require courage, and his father's consent. Obinna requested a private meeting with King Kelvin Benson, away from the council chambers and palaces. They met in the old royal study, a room filled with faded maps, ancestral portraits, and the weight of past kings. Obinna spoke carefully but honestly. He confessed his fear of being loved only for his title, his distrust of the women competing for him, and his desperation to know who would remain if the crown offered nothing. King Kelvin listened in silence, torn between his role as ruler and his heart as a father. At first, he rejected Obinna's idea. The throne was sacred. Deception, especially one involving illness, felt dangerous and cruel. But Obinna pressed on, explaining that without truth, any marriage would poison the kingdom from within. He wanted a wife who would choose him even at his weakest. After long silence, the king agreed, reluctantly. Conditions were set. The plan would be temporary, controlled, and known only to a few. A royal physician would supervise everything. No real harm would come to the prince. This was not a game, it was a final test of loyalty and love. As father and son sealed the pact, neither realized how deeply this decision would shake Onima kingdom, or how unexpectedly it would rewrite their destiny. The plan was set into motion quietly. Dr. Alistair Moore, the royal physician sworn to secrecy, prepared a rare chemical compound that caused an unbearable stench when applied to the skin. It was harmless, temporary, but powerful enough to drive anyone away. When Obinna agreed to it, the doctor hesitated, but the king's command was final. That night, the compound was applied, and the palace began to change almost immediately. By morning, the smell had spread through the royal wing. Servants covered their noses. Guards avoided the corridors. Maids whispered in fear. King Kelvin ordered the isolation of the prince's chambers and dismissed most palace staff to avoid suspicion. Obinna remained silent, pretending weakness, lying still as though life itself was slipping away. The deception felt heavier than he imagined, but he endured it, determined to see the truth. Soon after, the king made the announcement that shook the kingdom. Prince Obinna Benson was critically ill, suffering from a deadly sickness with only weeks to live. The news spread like wildfire through Onima village. Shock turned to fear, and fear turned to distance. The palace gates, once crowded with hopeful visitors, stood nearly empty, while the test of love had officially begun. The announcement changed everything. Bells rang across Onima village, not in celebration, but in warning. Markets fell silent. Conversations lowered to whispers. People spoke of the prince's illness with pity, fear, and uncertainty. Some prayed. Others stayed away from the palace entirely, afraid the sickness might spread. The once lively royal grounds felt abandoned, as if hope itself had retreated. Inside the palace, the smell grew stronger, pushing even the bravest guards to keep their distance. Curtains were drawn. Windows stayed open day and night. Obinna lay still in his chamber, unable to speak, watching everything through half-closed eyes. Each hour felt longer than the last. He wondered who would come, not out of duty, but out of care. Word eventually reached Susan, Rita, and Pamela. Shocked at first, they quickly decided to see the truth with their own eyes. None of them wanted to believe the prince they competed over was truly dying. Pride, curiosity, and fear drove them toward the palace gates, unaware that their choices would reveal far more than they intended. Susan arrived first, escorted by servants carrying scented cloths and perfumes. Rita followed soon after, covering her nose with silk, while Pamela came last, her expression tense and doubtful. The moment they stepped into the palace compound, the stench struck them violently. It clung to the air, thick and unavoidable. They exchanged horrified looks but forced themselves forward, determined to confirm the truth with their own eyes. When they entered Obinna's chamber, the sight unsettled them. The prince lay still, pale and silent, his breath shallow, his body unmoving. The smell was unbearable. Susan recoiled instantly, whispering in disgust. Rita turned away, tears streaming, not from sorrow, but from revulsion. Pamela tried to speak but could not remain composed. None of them reached for his hand. None asked how he felt. Fear and self-preservation filled the room. Murmuring among themselves, they made their decision without shame. A dying man had no future. A sick prince offered no throne. One by one, they excused themselves and fled the chamber. Obinna watched in silence as their footsteps faded away. In that moment, his heart hardened, not from cruelty, but from clarity. The truth he feared had finally revealed itself. The rejection did not end quietly. By the next day, Susan, Rita, and Pamela were seen openly in the village, speaking carelessly about the prince's condition. Susan claimed it was foolish to tie one's future to a dying man. Rita spoke of how unbearable the palace was, mocking the smell and the silence. Pamela, though calmer, still declared that love required a future, and Obinna had none. Their words spread quickly, stripped of sympathy and filled with judgment. Villagers repeated the stories with exaggeration. Laughter followed pity. Some mocked the prince openly, while others shook their heads in disappointment. The once admired heir was now spoken of as a burden of fate. Even nobles who once sought his favor avoided his name. The palace, once a symbol of strength, became a place people feared and ridiculed from afar. Inside the quiet chamber, Obinna heard none of the gossip, but he felt its weight. Each hour passed in isolation. His test had worked, but at a painful cost. Meanwhile, King Kelvin listened to the reports with anger and sorrow. His son had been abandoned not by enemies, but by those who claimed love. And still, the true test was not over. King Kelvin stood before the nearly empty court and made one final declaration. His voice echoed through the palace halls and beyond the gates of Onima village. He announced that Prince Obinna was close to death, and that the kingdom faced a future without an heir. In desperation, he promised a great reward, honor, protection, and lifelong security to any woman willing to love and stand by the prince until his final breath. The announcement was carried through the village, the markets, and neighboring towns. Yet no one came. The palace compound smelled so strongly that even messengers kept their distance. People listened, pitied, then turned away. Fear, discomfort, and self-interest overpowered compassion. The silence that followed was louder than rejection. King Kelvin returned to his son's chamber heavy with regret. He had agreed to this test hoping to protect Obinna's heart, but now he questioned its cruelty. Still, Obinna remained calm. Watching the empty halls, he realized something important. True love was rare, but he would rather wait alone than live surrounded by lies. Days passed, and the palace felt like a forgotten monument. The grand halls echoed with emptiness, and dust settled where footsteps once hurried. Most guards had been dismissed, and nearly all the servants had fled. Even the bravest could not endure the stench that surrounded the royal wing. The palace gates remained open, yet no one entered. It was as if the kingdom itself had turned its back on its prince. Obinna lay in silence, observing the slow collapse of the life he once knew. The isolation stripped him of pride and illusion. Without titles, crowds, or admiration, he faced himself fully for the first time. He questioned whether his test was worth the pain, whether love was truly meant for someone born into power. Yet, even in doubt, he refused to end the deception early. He wanted certainty, no matter the cost. King Kelvin moved through the palace like a shadow of himself. Each empty corridor reminded him of his decision. He watched over his son from a distance, torn between guilt and hope. If no one came, the truth would still be revealed, but the kingdom would lose something far greater than a prince. And just as despair settled deeply into the palace walls, an unexpected presence approached the gates, unaware that destiny was about to shift. Her name was Amara Williams, and unlike everyone else, she did not come with fear in her heart. She was a poor orphan who had known loss long before she understood hope. Raised on the edge of Onima village, Amara survived by doing small chores, cleaning homes, and caring for the elderly. She had no family left, no protection, and no expectations from life. But she carried something rare, quiet compassion shaped by hardship. When Amara heard the king's announcement, she did not think of rewards or fear sickness. She thought of a man left alone to die. With the palace nearly abandoned, she walked through the open gates without resistance. The smell struck her hard, yet she covered her face and kept walking. Her heart pounded, but she refused to turn back. To her, suffering was not something to flee from, it was something to face. King Kelvin was stunned when he saw her. A single young woman, poorly dressed, standing where nobles once stood. He warned her of the danger and offered riches if she would leave. Amara shook her head gently. She had not come for gold. She had come because no one else did. And for the first time since the deception began, something shifted within the palace walls. Amara entered Prince Obinna's chamber slowly, her steps careful, her expression calm despite the overpowering stench. She opened the windows wider, cleaned the floor, and replaced the water beside his bed without hesitation. She did not complain, nor did she rush. Every movement was gentle, as though she feared hurting him with noise alone. Obinna watched her in disbelief. This was not fear masked by duty, this was care without expectation. She spoke to him softly, even though he did not respond. She told him stories about the village, about simple joys, about how people survived when hope seemed lost. She wiped his forehead, adjusted his pillows, and stayed by his side far longer than required. She did not ask his name. She did not ask about the throne. To her, he was simply a man in pain. King Kelvin observed from a distance, his heart heavy with emotion. He tested her again, offering food, clothes, and shelter if she would leave the prince's side. Amara refused each time. She said she would stay until the end, whether that end came soon or late. And in the silence of the chamber, Obinna felt something he had never felt before, seen, not as a prince, but as a human being. King Kelvin decided to test Amara one last time, not as a king, but as a father desperate to protect his son from another lie. He summoned her to the grand hall, a place she had never dared to step into before. The vast room swallowed her small figure, its high ceilings and empty thrones reminding her how far apart their worlds were. The king spoke gently but firmly, offering her things she had never possessed, gold enough to change her life, a home, protection, and a future free from struggle. All she had to do was walk away from the dying prince. Amara listened quietly, her hands folded, her eyes steady. When the king finished, she surprised him. She did not cry. She did not hesitate. She thanked him respectfully and declined. She said wealth could feed the body, but abandoning someone in their final days would starve her soul. She explained that she had lived her whole life unwanted and alone, and she would never choose comfort over compassion. If the prince was truly dying, then no one deserved to die alone. King Kelvin felt his resolve break. This was not desperation speaking, this was character. He dismissed her with a heavy heart and returned to his son's chamber, unsure of what to do next. Behind the closed doors, Prince Obinna had heard everything. The test was over. The truth was undeniable. And in that moment, he knew the woman who stood beside him was the one he had been searching for all along. The room was quiet when Amara returned to the prince's chamber. Sunlight filled him through the open windows, struggling against the lingering stench. She moved toward the bed as she always did, ready to clean and speak softly, expecting only silence in return. But before she could reach him, a voice, weak, clear, and very much alive, filled the room. Amara. She froze. Her heart skipped, fear and confusion rushing through her at once. Slowly, she turned. Prince Obinna was sitting up, his eyes fully open, focused on her. The shock sent her stumbling backward. She whispered his name in disbelief, tears forming as she demanded to know how this was possible. The sickness, the silence, the suffering, it all rushed through her mind at once. Obinna spoke calmly, confessing everything. The illness was a lie. The smell, the isolation, the rumors, each part of a test meant to reveal truth. He told her of the women who left, the kingdom that turned away, and the father who feared for his son's heart. He told her he had watched her choose him again and again, without reward, without hope. And finally, He told her she was the one he trusted with his life. Amara collapsed into tears, overwhelmed by relief, anger, and disbelief all at once. She had come to comfort a dying man and instead found herself standing before a prince who had been watching her soul. Outside the chamber, King Kelvin listened as well, his eyes filled with emotion. The deception had ended, but what followed would change their lives forever. News spread through the palace like a sudden wind. Guards were summoned back, servants returned cautiously, and the royal court gathered in disbelief as Prince Obinna walked into the grand hall on his own feet. The stench was gone, the light dissolved, and silence fell as every eye followed him. King Kelvin stood beside his son, no longer burdened by doubt, ready to face the kingdom's reaction. Obinna spoke with calm authority. He revealed the truth without apology, explaining why the deception was necessary and what it had exposed. He spoke of ambition disguised as love, of loyalty tested by weakness, and of the courage it took to remain when there was nothing to gain. Then he turned to Amara, standing nervously among nobles who once ignored her, and declared her the woman he chose as his wife. Gasps filled the hall. Some nobles protested quietly, others stared in disbelief. Amara, overwhelmed, tried to step back, insisting she was unworthy of such honor. Obinna took her hand, steady and certain, and told the court that worth was not measured by birth or wealth, but by the heart revealed in silence. King Kelvin confirmed his son's choice, and with that approval, the fate of Onima Kingdom was sealed. The palace gates opened again, this time two familiar faces filled with disbelief. Susan, Rita, and Pamela returned after hearing the truth spread through the kingdom. Their confidence was gone, replaced by panic and regret. They demanded an audience, each insisting she had been misled, frightened, or misunderstood. Susan spoke of fear clouding judgment, Rita wept about shock, and Pamela argued that logic had failed her in the moment. None of their words carried weight anymore. Prince Obinna listened without anger, but without softness. He reminded them of the silence they chose, the mockery that followed, and the absence of compassion when it mattered most. He did not insult them. He simply spoke truth. The court watched as the women realized that the crown they once chased was no longer within reach. Their ambition had cost them everything. Amara observed quietly, her heart heavy but calm. She felt no victory, only clarity. The king dismissed the women respectfully, ending that chapter of rivalry forever. As they left the palace grounds, the kingdom understood a powerful lesson. Love proven in comfort meant nothing compared to love shown in hardship. Life within the palace transformed rapidly. Amara was given time, not pressure, to adjust. She was taught royal customs, governance, and diplomacy, but her kindness remained untouched. She continued visiting the sick, speaking with servants, and walking among villagers without guards whenever permitted. The people noticed. Slowly, affection replaced doubt. Prince Obinna stood beside her through every step, never rushing her into a role she did not choose. He shared his dreams of rebuilding parts of Onima village, improving education, and creating spaces where compassion guided leadership. Amara listened, added her own ideas shaped by poverty and survival, and for the first time, Obinna felt truly partnered. King Kelvin watched with pride. The palace no longer felt hollow. Laughter returned, warmth followed, and the once empty halls echoed with purpose again. The kingdom had not just found a future queen, it had found balance. The royal wedding took place beneath open skies, surrounded by villagers, nobles, and those who had once feared the palace. There was no excess meant to impress, only meaning. When Amara walked forward, she was no longer the orphan who entered alone, but a woman who had chosen love without reward and earned a crown without seeking it. Prince Obinna vowed not just loyalty, but honesty. He promised to rule as a man who had been humbled, tested, and changed. As king-in-waiting and future queen, they stood as proof that power without heart was empty, and love without truth was fragile. Onima village celebrated not just a union, but a lesson written into its history forever. The sick prince nobody wanted to marry had found what the strong, wealthy, and admired could not give him. And from that moment on, the kingdom entered a new era, built not on fear or ambition, but on genuine love and unwavering compassion. As this story comes to an end, remember that behind every luxury lies a truth few ever see. If this story moved you, support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Until the next unforgettable true story, stay inspired and stay curious.